morning, everybody. Welcome to Arcadia Christian Church. Let's stand up. Let's worship the Lord this morning. Father, let your kingdom come. Father, let your will be done. On earth as in heaven, right here in my heart. Father, let your kingdom come. Father, let your will be done. On earth as in heaven, right here in my heart. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us, as we forgive the ones who sin against us. Forgive them, and lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. Let your kingdom come. Father, let your kingdom come. Father, let your will be done. On earth as in heaven, right here in my heart. Father, let your kingdom come. Father, let your will be done. On earth as in heaven, right here in my heart. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us, as we forgive the ones who sinned against us. Forgive them, and lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. Let your kingdom come. It's yours, all yours, all yours. The kingdom, the power, the glory are yours. It's yours, all yours, forever and ever. The kingdom is yours. It's yours, all yours, the kingdom, the power, the glory are yours. It's yours, all yours, forever and ever. The kingdom is yours. Father, let your will be done. On earth as in heaven, right here in my heart. Father, let your kingdom come. Father, let your will be done. On earth as in heaven, right here in my heart. On earth as in heaven, right here in my heart. I raise a hallelujah in the presence of my enemies. I raise a hallelujah louder than the unbelief. I raise a hallelujah. My weapon is a melody. I raise a hallelujah. Heaven comes to fight for me. I'm gonna sing in the middle of the storm. Louder and louder, gonna hear my praises roar. Come from the ashes, hope will arise. Death is defeated, the King is alive. Raise a hallelujah.
Got a few announcements to start with today. One is I would encourage you, if you did not grab communion and you need that, depending on how today plays out, we may take communion in the middle of my message today, so you won't have a chance to retrieve it. Also, there's about 8 or 9 of these books left, and then we're out at Guest Central. If anybody wants one, More Than a Carpenter, on proofs and thoughts on the resurrection of Jesus. Some of our other announcements that we have, Craig Wolfgang has a class starting April the 27th on the mystery of God. It will be offered on Sunday mornings during the 9 o'clock, during this hour here, and also on Sunday evenings for those of you that are interested in participating in that. Also, our next women's ministry meeting will be on April the 23rd, and I'm sure there'll be more details on that coming later. And this coming Friday evening, we will be having a communion crucifixion type service here at the church. We did this several years ago. Actually, it dates all the way back into the early 90s when I was in youth ministry, and we started doing this out here on the hill behind the church, back by the shelter house. We will have a crucifixion scene starting at 8:30. At 9:15, there will be a short communion service with just a little bit of music, a devotional thought, followed by communion. And then that won't last, but the crosses will be up until 10 o'clock. You can come and go as you please. You don't have to be here at 9:15. If you want to come at 8:30, we will have communion available all during that time. If you want to stop in and have a little quiet time, you come and go at your leisure. But at 9:15, we will have a short service with a devotional thought and a little bit of singing. So that taken care of. Yesterday afternoon, my daughter accepted the invitation to marriage from the bravest man in the world. So Shanna is now officially engaged. That's something that Leanne and I have known was coming. We're excited for her and Jared. He is the youth pastor at the Converse Church of Christ up, if you go to camp, that's up there. And they actually met at Lincoln University when she was there, her freshman year of college, and then kind of reconnected. They didn't date, had no relationship at Lincoln. They just kind of knew each other and started dating, and through camp, she met him back here. So we're excited. We're excited she's going to be a part of ministry, and life is changing for the Moffats. Leanne told me last night, she said, "You know what this means?" And I said, "What's that?" She said, "I'm going to be lonely." So I don't know what that means about me, but hey, life rolls. So last Sunday, there were several who had asked me. Leanne had been with Shanna out in California, and a lot of people had asked me how my week had gone without them. It was quiet. Then they asked what I was doing. I said, well, Leanne and Shanna come home later today, but after church, I'm leaving for Augusta, Georgia. And they said, what are you going to Augusta, Georgia for? I said, I'm going to Augusta, Georgia to drive down there to have breakfast at Waffle House, and then I will be driving back. It's because I was headed for my lifelong dream of visiting Augusta National Golf Course, and I knew that I was going there Monday, and I knew it was supposed to rain all day Monday. So I was pretty sure it was going to get rained out. Josh Small and I took off, and we were going to meet Craig Wolfgang and Brian Kuhn down there. So Josh and I took off immediately after church Sunday, drove, got down to Asheville, North Carolina, and that was when we first got word that it was pretty iffy on Monday, even though we knew it was going to be iffy on Monday. And I asked Josh what he wanted to do because we weren't sure yet, and I said we can go to Spartanburg, South Carolina, we can go on down, whatever. He said, let's go to Spartanburg so we'll have a shorter drive. So we drove another hour down to Spartanburg and pulled off into Hampton Inn and went into the lobby, and as soon as we got in the lobby, the first words we heard, another guest that was already in there walked up to the front desk right in front of us, and he looked at the guy behind the front desk, and he said, hey, that bathroom in my room, the ceiling just fell in on the floor. not really the first words you want to hear when you're getting ready to check in to a hotel. And I looked over at Josh, and Josh was like, he's kind of nodding toward the door. And so we stood there a minute, and we ended up going somewhere else. And the bathroom ceiling was still intact in the Holiday Inn that we went to. We got up the next morning, ate breakfast, headed on down to Augusta. They opened the gates. We got in there and met Craig and Brian, and it was drizzly, kind of rainy day. We stood at the number 1 tee, stood at the number 10 tee. This is something I've watched for 50 years. I was so excited about being there. You know, I could tell you every hole from watching it on TV year after year after year. And so we started down the 1 fairway, got up the number 1 green. One of the holes I wanted to see was number 2. Stood there and looked at the tee shot, and it's a par 5, and it's long, but it's an eagle hole. We walked down through there, got down there, cut across a couple fairways, getting ready to cut across another one, and Craig goes, "We can't go that way." I just heard the guy say they're getting ready to blow the horn. So we went across the number 5 fairway. Here goes the horn. We're out to the car for 2 hours to sit and wait, and finally, we didn't go to Waffle House. We went to Willie Jewell's old style barbecue. I like Waffle House, but Willie Jewell's they were hitting it pretty good there. And then we drove home. So I was in Augusta National for about 45 minutes or an hour. But they did tell us they're going to reimburse our tickets and we get first chance. Craig Wolfgang has been in the lottery to get these tickets for like 25 years. He finally got them, and we got rained out. But we get tickets to go next year. My point in all this is this: everything doesn't always work out the way that you think it will. You know, everything doesn't always work out the way that you think it will. You know, we walked into Hampton Inn, wasn't exactly what we were thinking, and we exited out of there. You know, for weeks as we've been anticipating this trip down there, you know, it's always questionable rain, but you know, when we first started talking about this and going down there and what we were going to do, you know, this was not what we were thinking. People have asked me this week, "Are you disappointed?" No, I really am not. In 45 minutes, I got a great taste of what it is, and the fact that they're giving us the tickets for next year. Honestly, I'm kind of glad the way that it worked out. I'm not sure Josh Small will ever be the same, spending 22 hours on the road with me in about, you know, a 36-hour time span or so. I'm not sure he will survive that. But it was good, and not everything ever works out the way that we think it will. Jesus finished the Sermon on the Mount, and we finished that 2 weeks ago, and then last week we started into chapter 8, and today I told you that chapter 8 and 9, chapters 5, 6, and 7 is the Magna Carta of the King. It's what, you know, if you're going to live in my kingdom, this is what it's going to be like. These are the expectations. If you want to call yourself a Christian, a Jesus follower, and you want to be a part of his kingdom, these are the expectations. These are the way Jesus said that I expect you to live. And then last week we started into chapter 8, and I told you chapter 8 and 9, it's the credentials of the king. After he gives his platform as to what the kingdom's going to be like, then chapters 8 and 9, he starts to do these miracles, and he shows people that he has the authority. It's not just talk. He has the authority to be the one to establish the rules for the kingdom. I want to start in verse 14, and we're going to just read the rest of the chapter, and I just want you to get a taste for what's going on in the lives of the followers of Jesus. It says, when Jesus came into Peter's house. Now this is in Capernaum. We talked about last week. Capernaum on the northwest edge of the Sea of Galilee. When Jesus came into Peter's house, he saw Peter's mother-in-law lying in bed with a fever. He touched her hand, and the fever left her. She got up, and she began to wait on him. When evening came, many who were demon-possessed were brought in to Jesus, and he drove out the spirits with a word, and he healed all the sick. This was to fulfill what was spoken through the prophet Isaiah. He took up our infirmities, and he bore our diseases. In verse 18 it says, when Jesus saw the crowd around him, he gave orders to cross to the other side of the lake. And then the teacher of the law came to him and said, "Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go." And Jesus responded, he said, "Foxes have holes and birds have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head." Another disciple said to him, "Lord, let me first go and bury my father." But Jesus told him, "Follow me, and let the dead bury their own dead." And in those verses, Jesus is talking about, so often in our world today, we dumb down what it means to be a disciple. We've kind of rewritten the rules. When Jesus said, "Go and make disciples," he was talking about what it meant to be a disciple in his day, in his context. And we've kind of, in our American culture, we've rewritten the rules to be a disciple of Jesus in our context. If you go to church, kind of most of the time, and you give a little bit of your time, and you give a little bit of your money, and you kind of dabble in it. But Jesus was telling them, hey, this is serious business if you're going to follow me. In another place in Luke chapter 9, he said, "If you don't take up your cross and follow me every day, you're not worthy to have part with me." It was a heavy calling. In verse 23, it says, "Then Jesus got into the boat, and his disciples followed him. And suddenly a furious storm came up on the lake, so that the waves swept over the boat. But Jesus was sleeping. And the disciples went and they woke him up, saying, 'Lord, save us, we're going to drown.' And Jesus replied, 'You have little faith. Why are you so afraid?' And then he got up and he rebuked the winds and the waves, and it was completely calm. And the men were amazed, and they asked, 'What kind of man is this, that even the winds and the waves obey him?' And when he arrived at the other side of the region, in the area of the Gadarenes, 2 demon-possessed men came running up to them from the tombs, and they met him. And they were so violent that no one could pass that way. 'What do you want with us, Son of God?' they shouted. 'Have you come here to torture us before the appointed time?' Some distance from them, a large herd of pigs was feeding. The demons begged Jesus, 'If you drive us out, send us into the herd of pigs.' And Jesus said to them, 'Go.' So they came out, and they went into the pigs, and the whole herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake, and they died in the water. Those tending the pigs ran off, went into town, and reported all of this, including what had happened to the demon-possessed men. And then the whole town went out to meet Jesus. And when they saw him, they pleaded with him to leave their region. Jesus comes out swinging. After the Sermon on the Mount, to establish his authority, he comes out throwing haymakers. He comes out in a flurry of activity. He comes out and he shows that he has authority over the dark legions. Paul, the apostle, would tell us later that our battle is not against flesh and blood, but it's against the spiritual principalities in the spiritual realms. And Jesus, right out of the gate, shows that he has authority over that. He shows that he has authority over people's sicknesses. He shows that he has authority over the winds and the waves and nature. Jesus comes onto the scene, and I can't even imagine what the disciples, they go from being fishermen and tax collectors, and there's Simon the Zealot, and there's these guys that come from just normal walks of life to follow this guy who is a self-proclaimed rabbi. But this rabbi is different than any other rabbi they've met. People who are lame are getting up and walking home. People who are blind are seeing. People who have been possessed with demons now have their sanity about them. They're on the sea, and he calms the waves. He calms the winds. And what did they say? They said, "Who is this man?" It's an attention getter. Things are different around him. They go across into the area of the Gadarenes, and he drives the demons out of 2 demon-possessed men. And a whole herd of pigs loses their lives. And the people who were taking care of the pigs run into town and tell everybody, and the people come back and beg for him to leave. They would rather have the demon-possessed men in their presence than to have the godly shake-up that they had experienced. So this is Jesus over the next days and weeks and months as he walks through the hills of Galilee and sometimes down the Jordan Valley into the town of Jericho. Went down there, was baptized in the Jordan River at one point. Walks up to Jerusalem, sometimes into the town of Bethany, possibly a trip here or there to Bethlehem, back into Jerusalem. At the feast times, when they were supposed to go back for the feast that God had called them to observe. And then after the feasts were over, he would make his way back up the Jordan River Valley, back up to the area of the Sea of Galilee and the town of Capernaum, and in and out of the hills and around the towns and the villages and the people, day after day, week after week, and month after month, teaching and healing, forgiving, feeding, loving, discipling, pointing people to the Father, pointing people to his Father. Remember, Jesus taught with he taught with an authority that the other teachers didn't teach with. He didn't teach in the name of other rabbis. He taught in the authority of his Father. He was the connection of heaven to humanity, in and out of people's lives, on a daily basis, in and out of people's lives. He was in their lives because he was available. He was in their lives because he went from town to town, and he would often stop and talk with people along the road and deal with their issues.